Hey campers, this is NPS Ranger News. Our program features the amazing work of National Park Service Rangers, protecting people in parks across the country through law enforcement, search and rescue, emergency medicine, firefighting, and other emergency services. I'm Greg Jackson, your host. NPS Ranger News updates news stories every day as they happen, both on Facebook and Twitter. On Facebook, find us at /NPS Ranger News. On Twitter, we're at NPS_Ranger. With me today are two district rangers from Ozark National Scenic Riverways, Eric Herndon and Chris Figge. Thanks, guys, for being with me.
Thanks for having us, Greg.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Would like to talk a bit about your park and park operations. Tell me a bit about the park in general. Let's start with how big it is, how many visitors you get.
The park's approximately 83,000 acres. It encompasses 134 miles of the current Jacks Fork River. We're like a lot of parks, we're on a little bit of a decline. We had 1.3 million visitors last year. We peaked in 2005 with 1.5 million.
Okay, and where do visitors come from?
All over. We have a huge draw from our close metro areas: St. Louis, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee, Kansas City, Missouri. But we get folks from all over.
And what are the peak visitation times of the year?
We traditionally were the traditional Memorial Day to Labor Day type park, but we've kind of got a couple different seasons and a couple different draws. Memorial Day to Labor Day, people are coming to canoe and tube and raft the current Jacks Fork rivers, almost like a recreation area type use. But then the unique thing at Ozark is hunting is allowed in the park. So come November deer season, we get a pretty significant draw to deer hunt, and then in the spring turkey hunt.
Is hunting allowed throughout the park?
Hunting is allowed throughout the park. That was part of our enabling legislation, was to continue hunting and continue the Ozark heritage and lifestyle.
So deer season, any other things, wildlife that people are allowed to hunt?
Absolutely. Everything from small game to deer and turkey to large game are the big attractors. Fishing is huge on the river. In the Upper Current District, in Eric's district, trout fishing is big. When you come further downriver, like into my area, smallmouth fishing's large. We're in the process of partnering with the Missouri Department of Conservation on an elk reintroduction project.
Okay.
Elk hunting season is on the horizon. We're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We're not quite there yet, but it's quickly coming.
Okay. So they're reintroducing elk, and then they're going to allow hunting for them.
That is the ultimate plan, the end game.
Okay, once there's a significant population.
Yes, we've got the last numbers I heard, Eric, about 225?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's definitely growing.
The Missouri Department of Conservation has learned from other states like Kentucky and Arkansas that have reintroduced them to hunting sooner is better. 500 is kind of the magic number before they start looking at a season.
Okay, so that's a few years off, but not terrible.
Right.
Okay. So there's before I get into details of who is who, let me for those unfamiliar with National Park Organization, within a park, the park is led by the park superintendent, and the park superintendent has various branch chiefs to run things in the park. There is probably a chief of maintenance or facilities management. You have one of those there, I suppose.
Exactly, chief of maintenance.
Okay, and there's a chief of resource management or environmental sciences of some sort.
Resource management, yes.
Got it. Sometimes they retitle themselves. That's why I'm going into to that, because some places the chief of maintenance wants to be a facilities manager instead of a chief of maintenance, and that's fine. You have chief of interpretation, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay, and a chief ranger.
Yes.
Who is your boss? And the chief ranger works or has district rangers that the chief ranger directly supervises, and you have 3 districts.
Yes, sir. We've got the Lower Current, the Upper Current, and the Jacks Fork district.
Okay, and the Current is the name of one of the rivers there.
Yes, sir.
And Jacks Fork is another river, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know the Current River was there, but I forgot the name of the other river, and I now I know.
Jacks Fork's the good river, but I'm a little biased. Eric's gonna argue with me.
Okay, there's some dissent in the ranks
Everything
already.
runs south. That's all I got to say.
All right, and in some parks, district rangers will, for those that are unfamiliar with park organizations, it can go all sorts of directions from there. District rangers can be a first line supervisor. District rangers can supervise area rangers in some parks, and the area rangers could or could not be supervisors. So it's kind of a branching thing. You as DRs, are you first line supervisors?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, again, it depends on the size of the park. How many, let's see, let's go with total folks, commissioned folks in the park. How many are there now, law enforcement?
We've got 14 commissions, counting the chief and the law enforcement specialist. And then each district has 4 commissions in it.
Okay, so 4 times 3 is 12 plus the 2 that adds up to 14. Has that stayed steady over the years? I know your visitation has dropped slightly since its peak.
When I first transferred to Ozark in 2003, we had a couple more than that. Kind of some growing pains and that, but yeah, here recently that's been pretty steady, and that's a pretty comfortable number for us. Every now and again, we'll pick up a seasonal or 2 if we've got a special project going on, but that's pretty much the number.
Okay, and busy season is traditionally during the summertime, and it's usually traditional river users.
Correct, and then it rolls right in after Labor Day, after the river kind of slows down, right into hunting season, and there's plenty to do. It's just a different kind of busy.
Okay, I know there's camping as people go down the rivers. They camp along the riverways. Are there any other camping facilities, or are those on the Forest Service nearby?
No, we've got some fairly major campgrounds. The biggest one is Alley Spring Campground in my district. It has 100+ sites. Eric's got Pull Tight and Round Spring.
Yeah, Pull Tight's got approximately 55 campsites, and then 3 group sites. And then Round Spring's got approximately close to probably 40 campsites there, and then there's 9 total group sites there.
What?
And then Big Spring has a large developed campground. So we've got both those big front country campgrounds, and then we've got also what we call primitive campgrounds, which is basically a fire ring and a lantern post and a table, and we've got a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then gravel bar camping's allowed if you're floating the river.
Okay, so the campgrounds are there. How long? What's the average stay? How many days are people there for in the summer?
They're busy all week long, but on the weekends they fill up.
Okay, so if I come midweek, I might be able to get there, but if I show up Saturday afternoon and 4th of July weekend,
you can find a spot. You just might not find your spot.
Yeah.
It gets amazing to me. People get very possessive of their site. Site 616's where we always camp. That's our site. And It's kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, and they send advance parties to stake it out
Exactly.
a week in advance.
They also have some of our campsites are reservable as well. So some of the people get on Reserve America and reserve those possibly even up to a year in advance.
Wow. So camping, river use, there's hiking.
Hiking.
There's a spur trail that they just started that will connect to the Ozark Trail up in my district, just around the Round Spring area. And they're still working on connecting that to the Ozark Trail.
Okay.
So the Ozark Trail is basically the Midwest version of the Appalachian Trail. Much smaller scale, but the plan is running from St. Louis down into Arkansas.
Wow, terrific. That'll be something when it gets done. Let's see. I wanted to get into what a typical summer. I know there's no 2 days that are the same, but once summer gets going and things are busy, what's the typical call pattern for you?
It's the typical, like you've seen on TV, the party cops, drug, alcohol, DWI, domestic calls, stuff like that. It's kind of our traditional MO in the summertime. Get a fair amount of noise complaints. You cram a couple hundred people into a small campground. Somebody's going to be mad because the neighbor next door is being too loud and stuff like that.
Where's the local holding facility that you're able to take people to?
We have some small county facilities around. Eminence is Shannon County Sheriff's Office is kind of the main one we use. Those are strictly temporary holding facilities for like your public intox and your DWIs. Let them sober up and then release them 12 or so hours later. When we have an actual arrest and have to make them take them into federal custody, we've got to drive about 2 hours over to Cape Girardeau to the U.S. Marshals.
That's not fun. It's a long drive with somebody. What's your jurisdiction, or do you have multiple types?
Nope, we're all concurrent jurisdiction.
Oh, good. For those who don't know what that means, jurisdiction in a national park is dependent on what the enabling legislation of the park is. And some parks are exclusive federal jurisdiction, meaning the federal government is the person that gets to enforce all the laws, and with some exceptions. But the federal officers are allowed to assimilate or take in state laws and enforce those as well. And then on the opposite end, there is proprietary jurisdiction, and in those parks, the Park Service, the government's limited to enforcing some of it, just a certain number of its own regulations. But with Chris and Eric here, they are in a fortunate spot of being in concurrent jurisdiction, where the federal government has jurisdiction to enforce laws in the park and can assimilate state laws, and the state officers can come into the park as well if needed and enforce state laws. Do you ever see anybody from other agencies? Do you work with other agencies a lot?
We couldn't function without them, Greg. We work daily with the state conservation agents, with the Missouri Department of Conservation, and the Marine Division of the Missouri State Highway Patrol. Daily, I'm side by side with them every day.
I guess we can get into waterways a little bit, and enforcement on the water. They're out there on the water.
Yeah, so for years and years, Missouri had two state police agencies. They had the Missouri State Water Patrol and the Missouri State Highway Patrol. And so here, several years back, they merged and all became the Highway Patrol. And then they broke out and they had Marine officers who spend their time on the water, not on the road.
Okay. And so they're on the water daily throughout the busy time of the year on both rivers?
Yes.
How often do you see them on your river, Eric?
Normally, they spend quite a bit of time up there, so definitely throughout the weekends. And probably even they start in probably Thursday as well, so they'll go out and check people registration on boats and safety gear, and as well as work the river with us.
Let's see, and the park has boats as well.
Yes.
Okay, what boat do you what boat or boats do you guys usually have out, Eric?
Boats that we have are flat bottom boats, also known as kind of similar to a Johnson boat or a John boat. Normally, especially on my end, it's very rocky, very shallow. Chris has this on his upper side of Jack's Fork as well. We run jet motors primarily. We can also run props, but more than likely the prop is only going to be whenever it is in flood conditions, and because it's so rocky.
Sure, nothing more fun than dinging up a prop, especially it usually happens when you need the boat the most is when the prop goes bad. So jet boats. And Chris, what about you as far as boats in your district and your river?
Yeah, same deal. We're running outboard jets, and we've got our rescue boat as a prop, but we're running all the outboard jets. Usually we're running, they're 60 horsepower head boats, and it's on like a 1752 John boat.
So you're scooting down the river if needed.
25 to 30 mile an hour is about what they'll do.
And the state, what are they running? About the same?
Same thing, yeah. They have, in part of their zone, they've got some inboard jets, some of the big ones that are running like the 5-liter Mustang engines, but that's mostly down on the extreme lower end of the current river. So
there's people will bring their own boats, and there's also people will bring their own devices to float down the river in.
So usually the boats, the power boats, usually that's going to be your local people who live around here, going to be the ones that have those. We're starting to see a few people from out of town, St. Louis, the neighboring big cities, show up with them. Primarily, the tourists coming from out of town are floating in canoes, tubes, and kayaks. They will bring their own, but most likely they're going to rent one from one of our concessionaires.
Sure.
And they will pick them up at their campsite, shuttle them back to their campsite or their cabin or whatever they're staying in.
Okay. And I was going to get into commercial operations. There are concessionaires. There anybody else? There's concessions to rent equipment. Is anybody taking people down commercially?
There's a couple fishing guides and boat ride type operations. There's one large horseback trail ride operation.
On a river patrol type day, what goes on? Safety enforcement, alcohol enforcement, anything else?
Yes, all of the above. Safety, alcohol, illegal use of drugs, public intox is very major. Making sure people can safely make it down the river. We do respond to a few fights. You know, alcohol and water mixes together, and you start winding up with a few fights.
Sure, you bet. I was at Lake Mead, so I was spoiled with having larger boats to deal with. Taking somebody into custody on a small boat is probably not a lot of fun.
Not really. We try to, usually when we're running a boat operation, like in my district, for example, I'm not necessarily on a boat every day just because it's so shallow and so crowded. I'm typically driving into areas of the river that I can access and work from there. And Eric's the same way. Yep. Lower current district, Big Spring, they work out boats daily. But usually when you take somebody into custody, you try to get them to the nearest access and have a vehicle meet you to take them somewhere. And a lot of times our deputies and stuff will meet us to transport prisoners for us.
Switching hats for a moment from the law enforcement hat to the EMS and rescue hat, one has to imagine that there's a decent number of incidents that happen on a summer day. What do you get there, and who's there to help?
I'll let Eric's actually the EMS coordinator, and I'm the SAR coordinator. I'll let Eric address EMS first.
It's kind of interesting. I came from actually Glen Canyon National Recreation Area to Ozark back in fall of 2014. Initially, whenever I was going through the process of hiring here, they were talking about how many EMS calls they had. They said they average about 30 calls, and I told them, well, that's what I pretty much averaged whenever I was at Glen Canyon, just myself. That's for the whole park, so 30 calls for the entire park for the entire year. Most of the EMS calls, I would say definitely we get more EMS calls in probably Chris and I's district than we do in the lower current district. A lot of our calls are going to be snake bite related. That's where I've seen the majority of the calls. Other type calls are, people that have found a rope swing or something along the river and either landed in shallow water and injured themselves that way, or we get a few heart-related calls.
Yeah, your medical calls, older people come on vacation and stuff like that, and then a few dehydration, a little too much alcohol, not enough water.
Sure. Yeah. Who transports for you?
It depends on where we're at in the park, but primarily it's Mercy Ambulance, and they have 2 stations that provide service for us very close. One's here in Winona, the other one is actually in Summersville.
Good.
And then if we're on the very far north end of the park, it will be Salem Memorial District Hospital. On the southern end, you're looking at Carter County. If the call requires it, we also have Air Evac, which is based out of West Plains.
Okay.
Literally.
Good. Well, let me interrupt everyone and let me explain for folks that may not know. Most park rangers have some sort of emergency medical skills. They generally, the EMT, emergency medical technician level, is usually quite common, and rangers will arrive and provide treatment of the person, and usually have to call an ambulance. Some parks have ambulances, some parks don't. Some parks rely on nearby ambulances to transport, and that sounds like you guys are among the group that rely on private ambulance services nearby to do that, while you guys provide the emergency medical care upon your arrival. I got that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. Mostly EMTs. Is there any advanced medics?
No. I had my park medic whenever I got here. For 2 years, I didn't use it, so I fell back to an EMT. There are several. Right now, we have 6 EMTs in the park, and then for the rest are first responders.
First responders as well. Okay, sounds good. So if you call for an ambulance, on how long you wait for it?
Half hour is kind of a good average number.
Okay, and on a worst case scenario, if somebody's in one of the remote ends of the river, how long is that?
A lot of times they can't get to us. So depending on the injuries, we will either get them closer to the ambulance, or we'll go ahead and call for air vac ourselves, and they'll sit down and we'll just transfer.
Okay.
Direct air vac.
And that gets into the rescue side of things, and probably the search things, and search and rescue don't always go hand in hand. For those that are not always in the search and rescue mode, let me drop in the SAR acronym, SAR, search and rescue. You can search for people and you can rescue people. You can search for people who don't need to be rescued, and you can rescue people that have already been found. So what, as far as your activity level in search and rescue, what's primarily the on the menu?
All of the above, everything you just said. No, we've actually got a SAR team. We're both TechSAR capable, and because of the bluffs and the caves, and then we're Swiftwater capable. Swiftwater probably takes most of our time. We, in the community we live in, the National Park Service, we are the only ones around that are search and rescue equipped and certified. So we do actually back up. Missouri State Highway Patrol, they are swiftwater capable and certified.
Okay, so how often do you guys get called out of the park to go help out someplace?
A fair amount. We do respond to a lot of mutual aid calls for our local first responders, and we do help Missouri Highway Patrol a fair amount outside the park.
Good. So that's swiftwater. What other type of incidents do you come up with?
We have quite a few bluffs here in the park. People fall off of them. The classic hold my beer, watch this while they jump off a bluff into the river, and it was a little shallower than I planned. Stuff like that. And then we get a lot of just overdue floaters, hey, my son went floating on the Current River. He should have been back by 4 this afternoon. It's now midnight. Hey, can you go find him? Well, where was he? Well, somewhere on the Current River. Okay, well, we'll try to figure it out.
Are most of those self-solving SARs that take care of them?
Usually they show up somewhere else while we're trying to find them somewhere they're not. Heck, a lot of times I've been out looking for people and went right by them, and they didn't know I was looking for them. And when they were located later, oh yeah, I saw all the rangers. I didn't know what was going on.
How does the day shift or the days differ from the nights? Because I imagine people try and get off the river in the evenings, and your focus turns someplace else.
Exactly. Definitely a day shift to night shift is definitely a different job. Night shift, they get off the river. They've decided they haven't had enough beer. They've got to drive to the bar, so they're driving around our busy campgrounds with kids in them intoxicated. That becomes a issue. A lot of DWI enforcement, and we're usually responding to domestics. I've always said if you're going to get married, come on a float trip to the Current River and see if you can get along. Because we're responding to the domestics because they couldn't paddle a canoe together.
They had divorce lawyers there at the takeouts to passing out business cards.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Are you guys are a field training park? Is that true?
We are. We have been since the very beginning.
How does that work with your operation?
Awesome. It's more rangers in the park, more people. It's great, from Americanized standpoint on scheduling. It's real good.
It's a benefit, definitely. Gives us more manpower and can definitely spread out our coverage area a lot better than normally.
Good. Well, for people who aren't familiar with field training in the National Park Service, once a trainee finishes their time at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, they are assigned to a field training park, and they're scattered about the country. And the trainee arrives at the park and is paired with different trainees or different trainers through different phases of the program. And so you rotate trainees through to the different districts?
Both to the different districts, and we actually work with Gateway Arch National Park, Buffalo River, and Hot Springs, and we'll swap some trainees around with other parks too, depending on the phases.
Okay, good. The thing about the Park Service being able to do that is it gives people a really good experience as far as seeing how things are done the same way in different places and in different settings. So how many trainees do you take over the course of a year on a busy year?
This year is going to be the most. We got four in the queue this year.
And possibly another one.
Coming,
maybe.
Possibly 5 coming this year. So this year's we're gonna be firing on all cylinders this year.
And how many trainers do you have? Do you have a field training lead?
We do.
And how many
active trainers?
We got 4 right now. That's
4 active, and then we're getting ready to send 3 more. So yeah, we've got 7. Well, come next week, we'll have 7 field training rangers.
Okay, good. Yeah, for those that aren't familiar with, the field training program, you just don't pull a name out of a hat and saddle them with the burden or bless them with the prestige of being a field training ranger. They have to have a certain level of experience and background, and also be sent off to training on how to be a trainer, because it's certainly not that easy, and it's an eye-opening experience for many folks. So, what do you think most people who are trainees, when they arrive there and after they've gone through the program, how do you think the experience is for them?
The feedback I've heard is good. I mean, we've got a very complex operation here. From the feedback and the evaluations, they enjoy their time here.
I want to ask where everybody lives. And the field trainers, the trainees, they're only there for a few weeks, so they're put up in some temporary quarters.
Yes. That's kind of a complex issue in and of itself. So a lot of our park housing was destroyed during a catastrophic flood we had in 2017. We've got some outside contractors that we've been contracting some housing with into different districts. It's been working out well.
And as far as in regular employee housing, I know that the park doesn't have very many vacancies. People tend to come there and stay there for a long time. Where does everybody live? Why is it so nice, and why does everyone like to stay there?
That's a good question. I'm the living example of it. My intent was to come here, stay a couple of years, and move on. That was 16 years ago, and my current plan is to retire here. It's a good job. We've got support from our management. It's a nice, complex operation. You can be as busy as you want to be. The cost of living is really nice. It's a beautiful area to live in. It's very easy to get comfortable here.
Actually, whenever I moved here, I actually lived closer to the Jacks Fork district, and then whenever I got the position as the Upper Current District Ranger, moved up towards the northern end of that district, so I could be closer to my area where I worked. I would say definitely it is. Cost of living is a lot better here. It gives people the ability to, grow and be a part of a community that's outside of work versus, whenever you live in most of the western parks, you live within the park.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. We
also have several rangers that are locals from here. They were born and raised here, and this is the only place they've ever worked. Pat Jackson, the Lower Current DR, couldn't be with us today. He was born and raised here, went to high school in Van Buren, and worked here for 20 some odd years, and finally got the Lower Current DR position.
Except I'm hearing drywall. Okay. One more thing I'd like to get into is just some of the basics. If you're in law enforcement or emergency service, is dispatch. You got to have a dispatcher. Who's providing your dispatch services?
We're dispatched through Gateway Arch National Park. It's a regional dispatch center. They're running they've got an active CAD system, computer-aided dispatch, and task us directly into IMARS and
going on to other duties as assigned. Firefighting is a duty that rangers have. Many parks have dedicated firefighters, especially during fire season. But how do the rangers get involved in fire?
We help quite a bit. A lot of rangers are carrying their red cards. I'm sure you'll explain that. Matter of fact, last night I was on a fire with the fire crew. Our fire crew falls under the Resource Management Division, but they rely heavily on help from us.
Sure, and yeah, I can explain that a red card is the documentation that everyone's supposed to carry around that says that they're qualified to go and fight wildland fire. And at one point they were actually red. Now I think they're white with a little bit of, they might have some pink writing on them someplace. But
Yeah, exactly.
the good old days of the actual red card that was red. Okay, so anybody go out on any fire details?
I think about last fall, I
Everybody.
think everybody in the park was out.
Okay.
Either one capacity or another, either firefighter or security. Everybody was out.
Sure, I can explain that too. We'll go into when they're during fire season. The National Park Service and the Forest Service, they do not maintain firefighters, huge pools of them on staff all winter long. There are seasonal firefighters, and then there are firefighters that only go as needed. So during a big fire outbreak, people will get pulled from their jobs, their normal jobs. So law enforcement rangers and other folks in the park who are trained in firefighting will be able to, given the golden opportunity to go earn hazard pay and overtime by being sent across the country or nearby to fight fires. So that's what a red card is for. So you're ready to go with your red card to go and fight fires. Other details that folks get pulled out onto to go help nearby parks or national programs?
Yeah, Ozark's very active, and we're very proud to support the national emergencies. We've got members of the National Park Service Honor Guard, which is something I'm a part of. We've got members of the Midwest Special Events Team, and we've sent rangers on to border initiatives, the Border Surge Initiative. We're very proud to respond to all of these national disasters and national needs. We send people to everywhere. Hurricanes,
Boat team members, stuff like that, wildfires, any other kind of special events that's going on to assist anything.
Fair St. Louis, we're always up there.
And finally, the park has a position, the law enforcement specialist. What does the law enforcement specialist do for y'all?
Our law enforcement specialist is Jody Towery, and she's invaluable. She takes care of policy-related stuff, report stuff, evidence management, court liaison. She helps out a lot with investigations. We couldn't function without her.
Where's court?
Well, that's a good question. So, one thing we kind of left out, an odd part of Ozark is we actually fall within 3 different United States court districts.
Oh, my.
As Cape Girardeau, St. Louis, and Springfield, Missouri, whether you're in the Eastern District or the Western District.
How's that work out?
Difficult. Each court district has with the assistant U.S. attorneys, they've got their own priorities and their own quirks.
Directions.
Directions on what they want us to do. So it can be different, can be difficult.
Are the bail schedules the same in each district?
Now they are. It used to not be that way.
Oh, good.
And then a lot of times on some cases, we will actually take off our federal officer hat and put on our state peace officer hat and run some cases through state court locally here as well.
Okay. And that's not always common in the National Park Service. In some places it is, in some places it's not, where rangers will be cross-deputized and given some sort of state authority. How does that work there?
It works pretty well. There's a couple federal regulations or state regulations that we have trouble getting through federal court. For example, habitual DWI offender laws, things like that we will run through state court at works out a lot better for everybody involved.
Okay, now is anybody there deputized, or is this a process where you just take a case that's already federal and submit that through the state?
Exactly. Nobody's deputized here. It's just simply filing it through the local prosecutor and explaining that we are considered peace officers in the state of Missouri.
Okay, so you're not deputized, but you're authorized by state law to serve as peace officers, and it's done procedurally. Got it. Okay. For those that aren't following at home, you don't have to go to law school to to sort this out, but it certainly helps. The thing about all the different jurisdictions and authorities that National Park Service rangers have to figure out and deal with. How many counties is the park in?
4. Carter, Dent, Shannon, and Texas.
Okay, so you got one state, 4 counties, 3 different federal judicial districts. Everybody has their own rules and procedures, and it just makes it so much more exciting every day when you have to figure things out. Okay, Eric Herndon and Chris Figge, District Rangers from Ozark National Scenic Riverways. Thanks so much for being with me today, and I appreciate all the explanations of everything that's going on in your park.
Hey, thanks for having us, Greg.
Thank you.
Well, campers, that's all for now. Check back for new shows every few days. Breaking news comes out when it happens on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks for listening. And in case you haven't figured it out, NPS Ranger News isn't affiliated with the government. I'm Greg Jackson for NPS Ranger News. See you on the trail.